I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. Today I'm speaking with Fiona Frazer. She is the head of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. Well, Ms. Frazer, welcome to UATV.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
What kind of human rights violations has the mission documented in eastern Ukraine and Crimea?
In eastern Ukraine, we've mainly documented violations related to the right to life. With the ongoing armed conflict there, there are a number of violations regarding the fact that we have civilian casualties, we have allegations of arbitrary detention, ill treatment, torture, enforced disappearances. So on a day, every day, civilians on both sides of the contact line suffer from either the loss of life, injured, or they face difficulties in crossing the contact line, accessing water, food, and just being able to really ensure that they can lead their daily lives.
Mm-hmm. How is the UN mission supporting human rights in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine specifically?
We support the human rights situation in Ukraine, and we were invited here to work with the government. The government has the main obligation to ensure the promotion and protection of human rights for those who live within the territory of Ukraine. We support the government in doing so through our findings. We then pull together a number of recommendations. We undertake interventions with respective line ministries or with line agencies or with the parliament. And we also try to influence through other means the whole reform process that is currently being undertaken. So that may be advocacy work with other members of the UN family, with the civil society, with the Ombudsman institution. And yes, things may change in a short term, but we're actually here also for the longer term to really ensure that there is a situation in Ukraine that allows for individuals to access their rights and ensure that legislation and so forth is in line with international standards.
And is that the same for the situation in Crimea?
With regards to the situation in Crimea, we assess and analyse the human rights situation there based on two General Assembly resolutions. There's the General Assembly Resolution 68262 on territorial integrity that does apply to all of Ukraine, but there's also a recent General Assembly Resolution 71205 that calls on the perspective of the situation in Crimea to be looked at from the Russian Federation being an occupying power. So we now assess the situation there based on international human rights law and international humanitarian law. In theory, that should give more protection for individuals who continue to reside there.
Is the international community, is it doing enough to resolve the human rights crisis in Ukraine? And if more needs to be done, what needs to be done?
I think there is a very vibrant discussion and a human rights agenda for the promotion and protection of human rights in Ukraine. The international community is very geared up on it. We also have an extremely able civil society here, which therefore is a key partner for the international community. But I think it also needs to be fully recognized that the government of Ukraine is very open to discussing human rights, and we can see through the time that we've been here, some 3 years now, that there are real opportunities whereby the government will take on board a recommendation in order to achieve some kind of change or move forward in the protection of human rights. So it's a number of different actors who all have to work together and to really, as again, go back to the point of supporting the government to ensure that it is able to meet its obligations, and the international community is one of them.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, how does the mission work and the UN work with both sides of the conflict to help protect civilians?
As the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission, we are present on both sides of the contact line. We have teams who are permanently based as I say, on both sides, either in government-controlled areas or in territory that's under the control of armed groups. I will speak just for us, and our daily work is interviewing, documenting incidents where there have been violations of either international human rights law or international humanitarian law. We speak with witnesses, we speak with victims, we verify that information. Once we have that, we will then undertake interventions, be it with the government here in Ukraine, or we will also undertake discussions and interventions with the authorities who do have effective control in the territories that are under control of armed groups.
How should Ukraine deal with human rights violations?
Well, Ukraine, I mean, there are various means by which Ukraine can deal with human rights violations. I mean, clearly, we need to ensure that legislation that is adopted by the Parliament, that is in force, is in compliance with international standards that Ukraine has signed up to. But legislation is the footprint, let's say, and then you have to look at how that is actually implemented, and that is also maybe incumbent on policies as well that come out of the government. But then what really impacts for an individual living anywhere in Ukraine is how is that legislation interpreted and what is the in practice adopted by state officials.
What do you intend to do? What does the mission intend to do with governments that refuse to cooperate?
Well, as I am working here specifically in Ukraine, I will just comment, and my only comment will be on Ukraine. And for us, as I've already indicated, we have good cooperation with the government of Ukraine. We have very much an open door to discuss any particular concern we may have. We also very much want to work with them and outline where there have been improvements in the human rights situation, and this is, it opens the door for us to really go to them, raise concerns, and many times we actually do see that our advice is taken on board along with others, and there is some kind of change. So it's not an issue for us here because there's an open door to the question of human rights.
Well, I actually want to ask, I mean, has there been an improvement in the human rights condition here in eastern Ukraine?
It depends, I think, in which human rights area one is looking at. It's a very complicated situation in Ukraine, as we all know, and with the fact that there is a conflict going on in the east of the country has led to a more acute situation for some areas of human rights. We've documented over the past 3 years a particular situation with regard to arbitrary detention, ill treatment and torture. That was really quite severe practice and use of ill treatment and torture while individuals were in custody back in 2014, 2015. I think that we can see that in the last year and the months of 2017, there has been some change, and we have less reports of individuals facing such ill treatment while they are in detention. Human rights work, while we would like to see change immediately, is a long-term sort of path, if you like to say. And I think that's important also as we work to support the people of Ukraine in the reform process, but also clearly we need to see some resolution to the conflict in the east, which continues to hinder and hamper the lives of many individuals. And what we would like to see is that there are more confidence-building measures in place that really will try to unite the country in full, because currently we have an arbitrary line that divides communities and families.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Frazer. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. I was speaking with Fiona Frazer. She is the head of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. You're watching UATV.